Be live.
Okay, yes, it says it's being live streamed, so we've got it. Okay, yep, Zane is on that. Okay. So this is Senate Finance. This is January 4th.
Third. Oh my God, I was like, did we do someday already?
And today we're just going to be doing a committee get together, talking about priorities in general and then priorities in this committee. We have a new committee assistant who is brand new because, and I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, but the committee assistant who was supposed to be here quit 2 weeks ago. And Zane is.
Who was a different person?
It was a different person. So Faith is back with us for 2 or 3 weeks remotely till we break Zane in. So Zane.
Hello, everybody.
Say hi and tell us who you are.
My name is Zane Buckminster. I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom in St. Johnsbury. I was just working for the judiciary, and now I'm here.
So, hey, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
You love St. John's Dog Mountain.
Oh, my favorite places. Okay, and Faith, we all know, is here with us remotely and helping us get organized. I think this year as a committee, we're gonna start out looking, well, I've got one bill I'd like to get through in the first week or two, which is the property tax abatement for towns that had a lot of damage due to flooding. We did the same thing with a few tweaks after Irene. And basically, if towns abate taxes now on a property, they still have to pay the full school tax to the state, which is something of a burden. I guess we were afraid when we did Act 60 that if we let them abate, they'd just abate maybe colleges or businesses or something. But this bill, there's one in the House, but Representative Kornheiser said we could start it. We just say, if you've abated property because it's underwater, and it's, you know, it's a limited duration, but it's a flood recovery thing, and it just is, you don't have to pay the state school taxes. The towns that are doing this and have lost a lot of grand lists are struggling. The two biggest ones are Barry and Montpelier, but I'm sure Ludlow, Johnson, and some of the others are in the same situation. So shouldn't be controversial. We've done it before, and like to get it out like the BAA so that towns know that it's coming when they're doing their budgeting, and give them that helping hand. Other than that, I'm sure with all the omnibus flood bills, at some point, we're going to be asked to raise some money somewhere. But that will be at the end. At the beginning, and I have a feeling we might be asked to do, I know we're gonna be asked because the governor has a bill coming out. Brandy, are you on the bill for housing?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll
Well, we have a bill for housing. There's a slightly different bill that has more stuff in it that the House has, which is the fundamentals of my bill. But at the same time, we're talking economic development as to whether or not we can combine all of this into a single committee bill, because I think that we're largely on the same page.
We're working on getting that House housing bill scheduled for next Friday.
So the one that the administration has talked to me about would have a 5-year moratorium freeze on property taxes. And
For all the owners?
no, just for the people that
Sure.
rehab blighted housing, or, you know, you made improvements, but you would also increased housing stock, that your property tax would be frozen for 5 years. I said, I'm not comfortable signing on to that until I get a handle on what's happening with the property tax. If 18% is a 1-year perfect storm, or if this is what we're looking at in the future. So,
Well, I mean, the real question is whether we wind up with 18% or whether or not we, you know, my sense is it's going to be lower than that by the time it's done.
yeah, I mean, all these things.
People just can't afford 18% property tax.
No, they cannot. And so I'm not sure I'm gonna get, everybody go buy stuff.
I know.
Because we got, the money chair's got the ed fund status, and the revenue came in was as projected, which would be probably the November sales tax, but that picks up part of Christmas. I was hoping we'd get a nice boost over December, but that's what we're gonna be working on, I think, to start out, is the property tax. School tax, yes. Yes,
Which isn't always fun.
true, the school tax. And there's a lot of other proposals out there. They were out there last year about second homes and I'm sure we'll be dealing with that in economic development and it'll come here, but that's the big one we've got this year. I'm sure there'll be housing and things. We got a couple of bills today, which I will try and get scheduled. I think that's it on my end.
When you said everybody buys stuff, what you were getting at is that the sales tax is disappointing?
The sales tax, no, it's not disappointing, it's as projected.
Okay,
But the sales tax is the non-property tax revenue, it's the state revenue, the general fund, it would go to the general fund, that goes in. So if the sales tax goes up, then it doesn't go
Don't
up
have to
as
go up.
much.
right.
But also very unpopular nature of business.
Yes. All of those.
Buy things downtown.
Yes, Walgreens actually opened this week.
Oh, that's actually helpful.
The pharmacy opened maybe a month ago. You had to go in the back door and you go down through the cellar and up, but the pharmacy and the whole place is open now.
And you mentioned holding towns harmless for flood losses on their tax base.
No, we're not, they're losing their tax base. What this does is say, you've lost your, you've abated their taxes because they were underwater and the law now says that if they abate the taxes on their residents still have to raise the school tax to come to the state. And this says, if you abate them, you don't have to, they've lost it on their grand list and there's no reason why they should pay it to us.
I chose my words poorly. That was actually how I did understand.
Basically the same thing we did in 08.
Several years ago, after Irene.
Yeah.
We also dealt with the unemployment history of businesses for UI purposes who had to lay off employees because of the flood.
That hasn't come up, and that would be an economic development. This time we did have flood unemployment, if you were laid off because your business was flooded.
DUA.
The UA, but.
So that's a different
Disaster unemployment.
a different context
Yeah.
than under good.
We had a lot of trouble, and I gather we are continuing to have a lot of trouble to get unemployment checks out.
Right.
But we had a lot of trouble getting those flood unemployment checks out.
Didn't Senator Forrest bill in that year deal with employers
The rating.
who were getting hit with higher rates
Okay,
because the employers were not responsible
for the
for.
layoff.
And we were somewhat, we were tied down by the feds. I mean, this is we administer a federal program, and they had all sorts
I
of.
think they've sorted that out. I think that's why you had the
We
DUA.
may have, because that hasn't come up,
Yeah.
and I'm quite sure that the businesses downtown would have
Yes.
told me. Because I've been contacted by some of them who were having trouble getting the unemployment insurance because, they were all caught up in mopping up the mud and didn't get the application on time, so they were being hit with increased UI rates.
Let's just keep one eye covered
Yeah, I
for
think
that.
that would be a big one.
I mean, I was paying attention and I was frustrated with DUA and some of the eligibility, like if your car was destroyed in the flood and you need it for work, you got DUA, but if your car was stranded and you couldn't get to work because of that, you didn't get DUA. So like there were lots of things that bothered me that I tried to talk to
Shit in the water.
Laser about.
And generally those are federal.
Yeah, it was, there wasn't,
Yeah,
so I was trying to keep.
so there's gonna be a lot of things coming out of the flooding. I mean, we just paid off the last FEMA from Irene last spring, so we'll be finding issues come up. I mean, Montpelier is definitely suffering, but part of what it's suffering is we don't have state employees. I mean, the parking lots are empty. Parking is not a problem in Montpelier right now. And those state employees were the lifeblood of downtown. And the difference between Barry and Montpelier is we had a guaranteed market. And I don't even know what our remote policy is in the state.
Well, it's obviously changed, and a lot of people say that a lot of the economic problems are caused by the flood. It's not. It's caused by the change that occurred during the pandemic and the move towards remote work to some extent, and that's going to continue regardless of what recovery we do.
And just digital transactions or so.
Yeah, I mean, downtowns, what was it? Big department store had been in San Francisco, closed up. They've been there for 50 years, but there's just no foot traffic because people are working remotely, and the one day you come into the office, you're in the office. So that's a transition, and
Well, that again is one of the things that I think the state government needs to look at, is where we've got places in state government in which the desks are filled 1 or 2 days a week, yet the space is vacant all the rest of that time. And so I think we have a horrendous amount of vacant space that is wasted, and that's an economic issue for us in terms of how to recover funds if that's going to continue.
Right. People have wanted us to look at vacant space from an economic and a tax perspective, just vacant commercial spaces, what the costs and benefits are of having a vacant space and just holding it.
Turn it into house.
well, if we are working remotely, I mean, we have fewer state employees than we used to. We've got a brand new campus in Waterbury. And yeah, if you're only coming in 2 or 3 days a week, now we might go. My daughter-in-law is in Montreal. If she wants to use her desk, she has to call in 24 hours before, and she reserves her desk from 9 to 2. If she doesn't get in there by 9:05, somebody else gets her desk for the day.
Right.
Which I guess is where it can go. You have much smaller, and you just rotate people.
So one, I'll start with an apology that I was late on day one. After telling Sarah Hinsdale what time we started, I went into Sarah Natural, I just wanted to ask me a question, and then that was the end of being on time coming down the hall. So my apologies. The 18%, seems like we've seen numbers like that many times before. So many, but it's not that alarming because it seems like it's math that delivers a not so useful number, but it's pro forma, and then the real world intervenes and we come out much lower. So I don't know, when you see 18%, what do you think about?
I mean, the December 1st letter is precautionary. It says to the school boards, if you pass the budget that your superintendents seem to think you need to function, this is what they're predicting, then this is what's going to happen to your tax rate. Some towns will not pass the budget, some towns will. We won't know until that's done, but Julie will be in on Friday, and I've had her looking at the impact of waiting. There's some really counterintuitive things, at least around here, going on. We added the category of being rural. So one of my wealthier rural school districts is gaining and Barry City is losing. But if it gets paid for being rural, and if we you know, if we created enough rural extra kids, then, and not need more taxpayers, then it's gonna get costly. So,
the wealthier areas are getting a break and the
well, it
harder
looks,
worker,
it
harder
looks,
pressed areas are
it-
getting squeezed.
it depends on how you, they're still crunching numbers, it's still too soon to know. I'm just looking at my local area, and it was counterintuitive last year. And
Pattern for the last 40 years.
this is also, but that can,
Squeeze the poor, give the
No.
rent.
the poor,
Advantages to
the
the
poor been
wealthy.
getting extra, been waited for years, and we upped that. I think it's the ruralness, if you're living in a McMansion on top of a ski slope, I don't think we need to pay extra to education. We'll figure it out. Because not all rural is the same. But, we're continuing to try and crunch those numbers. Brad James has retired, he's still helping, but we have a new person that's taking over for Brad, and it's a very complicated system, so that's also a struggle. But I don't think it's ever been 18% before, but I think it's been 10. But these are also hard times, and so we'll be looking at that.
Have you, you know, at different times in here, we've talked about, Ron has a lot of, a high number of, you know, second, third homes. And we've talked about adjusting property tax based on, is it a third home, et cetera. Is there any serious discussion going on that you're aware of?
There's serious
along the line?
bills out there, and I think we've asked to have, I know we did like 2 years ago, the tax department do a more granulated breakdown of what was in that non-homestead category, and then look at it. I know you said this morning, housing is looking at,
There's a preliminary, there's like a midpoint report, right, coming from the group that's looking at the tax rates. I think did that pass? It was a Ways and Means proposal.
we had one that just asked to break it down, what's
Yeah.
in that non-homestead.
Right.
You know, what percent is business, what percent is second homes,
Yeah,
and then
and they're gonna give us.
there's also a lot of people that own a home. They're in it in the summer, the winter, and then short-term rental it
Mhm.
out. And then in some areas, especially on ski areas, I've heard, where there's people, businesses that buy up homes and rent them out. And
Mhm.
that, to me, is the biggest danger, is
Yeah,
buying up homes. If you own a house and you live in it part of the time and rent it part of the time,
right.
that's kind of your business.
So, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Senator Cummings, I think I did, but, I was speaking with folks from ESRI when I was at CSG in North Carolina in early December. And ESRI, for anyone who doesn't know, informs all of the GIS offices around the country. So they are like the backbone for the entire country. And they're kind of at the disposal of legislatures and tax departments and GIS folks. They have worked with Colorado, another big ski resort state, on very granular data collection that allows them to map out ownership of property by if the owner lives in the town, in the county, in the state, in the country, or somewhere else in the world. So I'd really like somewhere for us to talk about, so we're gonna talk about it.
Well, you know, I was thinking about too, I'm not drawn to some sort of punitive scheme like,
Mhm.
well, you can afford a third home,
Yeah.
so you should pay more by
Right.
virtue of that, like that. That's not my thing. I'm really thinking about in part how, as Chair was saying, you know, it withdraws how from
Yes,
the market.
yeah.
And then the other thing is, having just finished the season of building, it draws workers, because if you're
Yes.
building high-end homes, you're busy there, and there's limited
Yes.
crews out there. And
Right.
if you're a builder, are you are you interested in building something affordable at 320? Or are you happier building something for 800?
Well, other than the fixtures, your base price is the same. I mean, the concrete, the water, the sewer, the septic, I mean, all that base work. So, yeah, we've got a problem in that the price that a builder can build a basic ranch style, which we shouldn't build in Vermont because the heat goes out the house, basic cape, is the base cost of that is more than the average Vermonter can afford to pay. And how we fix that, I don't know, but.
Well, is the base. I got a bunch of new towns in this redistricting,
Yeah,
and I asked people why, how long have you lived here? And I was surprised at how many had lived here recently, and moved recently. And the base price of building a house had nothing to do with what they paid for it.
oh, no, I mean, the cost to build my house and what I paid for it has nothing to do with what it's valued at today. But I'm saying if we are going to build any number of worker housing, the base cost, and I was saying was around 300,000. I said that to Montpelier City Council and my former boss, Tim Heaney, who built, he's built several condo projects around here. So it's more than that. Oh yeah, it's a lot more. And it's just basic site work. I mean, you gotta pour cement and the septic is the same and the water and sewer and you need a few more 2x4s to do a bigger house, but just that basic cost, the lumber, the labor, it's up there. And that makes it hard, and if you only build one house at a time, you don't get any economies of scale, so.
Well, and I agree, it just,
doesn't have
it's not punitive, but you're essentially just saying, this is a luxury, this is a luxury tax, because if you can afford a second home, you can probably afford to pay a little bit more than someone holding on to their only home that they need to live.
Right, although in Vermont, we end up always with that thing of many people can't for a modest means, so it's officially it's a second home.
We could say uninsulated.
Yeah, we've done that.
Our problem is not having people be able to afford to buy second and third homes. That's not our problem.
Exactly. They can afford to pay a little bit more.
And they
for
will,
ownership.
and they will. Our problem is that the workers we need, the nurses, the teachers, I really want to know what Jesse Ventura did. In Wisconsin or Michigan? Minnesota.
Yeah,
When I
Minnesota
was
did a
first
great job.
here, many years ago, I was on a housing study, Senate House, and the person then, so it was probably around 2000, was Jesse Ventura, was the governor, and he had this whole program for building worker housing, and the pictures up on the billboards were teachers, nurses, doctors. I mean, we were in Sarducci's last night. Much slower now because they don't have the wait staff they had before. On the Saturday after Thanksgiving, my grandsons walked downtown to get something to eat. The only restaurant open in downtown Montpelier, sandwich shop, anything, was Julio's. I mean, and a lot of it is you just can't get help to be there. And ask Senator Sears about trying to get any kind of home health. They just don't have the people.
The other housing tax related thing is that I talked to Sam Ramsdale about a little bit. It is so much less costly and so much faster to take a home that's a single family home and duplex it. And you can create quote unquote new housing in very short order by remodeling compared to starting with a brand new site and you have to do everything from scratch. Like on the order of 2 to 4 months for remodeling versus closer to a year. I don't know if there's if we've considered it all supporting that kind of duplexing tax treatment.
Well, I think that's what the governor is proposing.
Who owns the duplexes?
Well, that's
Yeah, I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking aloud about that topic. Is there a way to make duplexing more attractive by, looking at, because I don't know, for instance, if you duplex, if then your grand list value goes up, you say, oh, it's a more valuable property now.
Right.
So if we build a penalty into doing the very thing that we're
Well,
hoping people will
That's
do.
what the governor's proposal, I think, is doing. We'll know when it gets here. But it's saying if you do that, then for 5 years, your
Right,
property
okay.
taxes are gonna
That's
be
the
the
5-year
same.
thing you're
It's
talking
a
about.
5-year, yeah.
It also depends on the town, because if half your house becomes commercially rated, then sometimes it goes down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Because
that's
of
right,
our
because the commercial
structure.
rate is lower than the homestead rate. And some of you were gonna have to deal with that. We knew it when we said it 20 years ago, that eventually
Right.
they would cross, and
Yeah.
they crossed.
And we would act.
I thought we would
And we
act,
would
yeah, I
act,
thought we
yes.
would.
Haven't acted.
We haven't acted, okay.
The
we can do
outcry
that
has
this year.
not been loud enough to make us do the painful floor lighting, but, that's out there, and yes, there will be a proposal to do that. Then you get down to Senator McDonald, who owns it. And I think, and this would be in economic development, when we were talking about taxing second homes, or short-term rentals, I started getting emails from people. And I wrote back to every one of them and said, can you tell me why you aren't doing long-term rentals?
Yeah.
And every one of them got back to me and said, it's too expensive and it takes too long to get out a lousy tenant.
You get out of what?
A lousy tenant. And I think we need to take a look at that.
My ex-wife provided free housing for a year and then finally had to pay them $2,000 to leave.
Get out. Yeah. And,
It's on list.
yeah, I mean, if we've got a disincentive to do a long-term and we want long-term, we're gonna have.
Right, we have extremely low rental vacancy, let's say it that way, because many people are taking their properties off of the open rental market.
Well, I think, for ADUs, at least in Bristol, the rule, I don't know if this is statewide under the housing bill, that the house, in order to have an ADU, had to be owner occupied. So to Senator McDonald's question.
Is there anything that says if you put in an ADU, that it can't, within any amount of time, become a short-term rental?
Something less than a duplex.
I
remember Senator Sorokin talking about that, but I don't know where we landed. But I've also already seen an ADU develop where it violated
Yes.
the homeowner must live in the
Senator
house.
Clarkson is
Yes.
very attached to the owner occupied piece, even though a duplex doesn't have to be owner occupied, et cetera. If we can have that discussion again, we will, because it's hard to sell
Well,
if you don't know what the treatment is.
Yeah, it's one thing for my kids to put an ADU and put me in it in the backyard. Once I'm gone, are they gonna wanna put a stranger in there full time? Are they gonna rent it short term? My betting is most people will do short term rentals.
Well, just so everybody knows, we're gonna look at short-term rentals too in committee, and I think I shared this with our committee, but the top line from the data we have purchasing AirDNA, which is a software tool that looks at short-term rentals and tells you how long they're being rented, et cetera. What Maura Collins is gonna come in and tell us is that maybe 5 or so communities in Vermont have a lot of short-term rentals, and then there's a huge drop-off. And so we're getting a lot of feedback
Yeah.
from the 5 that feel besieged, because they are, but making a statewide policy around that would really impact the person getting a little bit of income from their attic or their.
Yeah. And the other thing is, a lot of those towns I'm willing to bet are ski or vacation towns
Right.
who depend on the money from those
Yeah.
vacationers. Swallowed something wrong way.
Are short-term rental people equally likely to just not move and wait until they have to be?
No, because, I mean, so
They don't have.
there's much less risk. That's why a lot of people will do long-term rentals through these sites. There's insurance protection, there's lawyers at your, service from the company, and there's your rating. So you don't just use it once and like ruin your clout. You want to be considered a good actor, so you leave when you're supposed to leave, etc. It's a commercial, it's essentially a market running itself.
You rate the facility and the owner that you stay in, and the owner rates you
Yeah.
as a guest. So when you go to book something, you know if the last 3 people said, ugh, and the owners, when you go to book, know if the last 3 places you booked said, oh no, don't touch them. So there's less risk, and you've only got a 1-week rental, and we don't have anything that says you can't be thrown out from, is it November to March? You can't.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you're not getting any money, but you're paying the taxes and you're paying the heat and lights unless you want everything getting shut off.
So Burlington said you can only do Airbnb and other rental platforms for 30 days or more. So these 5 or so communities could regulate it
If someone stays
themselves.
over the 30th day, they get thrown out right away.
I mean, Burlington police aren't throwing anybody out, but you're kind of not using this system generally if that's the situation that you're
Yeah,
in.
see, Burlington in 30 days, I've got Stowe. People come there to ski for a week, maybe 2 weeks. They rent a house, then the next week somebody else rents it. Those towns, and I'll bet all 5, depend on that tourist income to survive. So if we say you can't rent houses to them short term, somebody's gonna have to build motels,
Exactly.
something else to house them in, and we know how much we like motels covering our landscape. So we're kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't provide housing for the people that you need to come here to support your economy, then we've got to find a balance there somehow. But I think if we just banned it wholesale, we could have some problems.
There's probably some issues regarding the economics of the situation too, because typically in a short-term rental, rent is much, much higher than it would be for a long-term rental.
Right.
And the owner theoretically is, if they can keep the property rented, is doing much, much better economically, getting more tax revenue.
It's
as a result.
furnished, there's insurance coverage if anything gets damaged. So when we've talked about landlord risk mitigation, we're trying to create our own government solution to a market solution that exists if you use these programs. They mitigate a lot of the risk, and private landlords just renting to someone in Vermont feel a lot of risk.
Well, Airbnb does maintain like the rooms and meals tax.
Yeah, it collects,
So there's
so we're also
another
getting
revenue stream that doesn't come off of rent.
Right, but we are now, the big platforms are collecting rooms and meals from us. And when we first started looking at this, both here and in health and welfare, the tax department also, I was surprised to learn, is very diligent about watching ads in the paper for, house on Lake William, for rent July 3rd, and they will contact them and say, you owe rooms and meals tax on that. So we're watching. It's just like we watch all the car dealerships, you gotta register here, but all the appliances and things over the New Hampshire border,
Well, there's also an issue as far as the perception of individual freedom in terms of the landlord, because the landlords are often saying that, look, if you force me into renting in a conventional fashion and you establish eviction laws and other kinds of laws that make it impossible for me to effectively control my property, I don't want to do that. I will use the short term because I don't have those headaches. And that's the thing that encourages people to do short-term rentals.
That I think Randy has an important point, based on what I'm thinking of, the constituent communications I get. I hear from landlords all the time that they can't get rid of a lousy tenant. And we have created, man, I hope my bleeding heart liberal credentials are intact, you know, where this is coming from. But we gotta make- But we do have to make this work
Yeah.
for the landlords, you know?
Yeah.
There is a property rights issue, but there's also just a matter of getting it done, that there is a housing shortage. And part of that is that what could be housing is vacation.
Well, I want us to have a hearing to start to address this issue with Section 8, because that is money we leave on the table that the federal government would use to pay people's rent, and less than 20% of people can find a place that will take their Section 8 voucher, and we have to better understand if there's something we can do so that they see that person and want to take a second chance.
And again,
Section 8 is.
Section 8 is the federal housing voucher program, so
they pay,
market rate,
yeah,
but people disagree, but what I've heard is if you take one Section 8 tenant, you have to take anybody else that applies. There's a lot of regulation that comes with it on top of Vermont's regulation. That means we have very low uptake of Section 8, and that's federal money that we'd otherwise be getting to pay people's rent.
and if there's a shortage of housing, then landlords aren't gonna do it. I mean, if
If they can get a reliable
competition,
tenant,
then
yeah.
Section 8, the landlord gets paid directly,
Right.
which is secure for the landlord.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't have to worry about non-payment of rent.
Right.
And,
And just to be fair to these points, I mean, in a housing shortage, there are definitely still landlords that are willing to leave it vacant rather than rent to someone that they're worried about taking a chance on.
I know landlords in that situation.
Absolutely. So we have to listen to them. We can't ignore what they're saying.
during my last stint on economic development, we took it up. I think Kevin Mullen was chair, and it's painful. I mean, for every bad tenant, there's a bad landlord, and that's who you tend to hear about, and not the ones, all the ones in the middle that work it out. But all it takes is one really bad experience, and that makes it, around, and people get gun shy. So we've got to let them know that, we've got their back. Okay, but that's all housing. We're gonna get that. I thought there were bills out there for doing
Go ahead,
different taxes. And any of those will come here, any different taxing structure, or extra taxing, or.
Well, the climate super fund, if that makes it, that would come here.
And that's just
well-
suing. I don't think that.
It's
would
just
come.
suing, so that's not because
No.
it's not like revenue, I thought.
It's not a tax, I'm trying to remember how it arrives, but I don't think it arrives in form of tax.
Okay, so there's,
It would be a,
Settlement,
okay,
it would,
sort of.
if it was we brought the suit. Cause we get settlements, and then if they go to the Attorney General, I think. But we get, if it comes in, if it's a grant or a gift, it would have to go through joint fiscal, because we have to accept all. That's how we got control over the ARPA money, because it was a grant from the federal government to the state. And that wouldn't be a grant.
It has to be approved by appropriations.
I think the goal is to get everything that we go through the normal appropriation process.
Kind of thing, I'm sorry, I've read the bill and I don't remember the detail, but it's like a new flavor of something akin to a settlement. So how the money comes to the AG's office, but that's like a damage suit, and it's not for that. It has a parallel, but it's.
I don't think it
arrives.
would come here. When the money arrives, who disperses it?
Right.
Yeah.
When I hear super fund, I think polluter pays, which is a revenue scheme,
Yeah,
but I guess it's not.
yeah, I don't, but if it does, we'll work on it.
I wanted to rip the Band-Aid off of talking about TIFs, because we're getting a very specific request here in an economic development to look at disaster zone related TIFs. I'm looking at Mark, obviously, because we need some convincing potentially, but we're just being asked to look at a new type.
And I don't know if that's what's merged into the 5-year.
I think it's different.
Yeah.
I asked Alex because
I said the last time I talked to the tax department, which was last week, that given, I've got to get a handle on what's happening in
Exactly.
property tax.
yeah,
And given that if we're going to do 5-year moratoriums for a whole bunch of housing units, I think to get it through the Senate as a whole,
right,
I'd probably have to have a moratorium on it.
right. I think it's a menu of
It's-
options.
yeah,
like
it's
what it's gonna
it's,
be.
I guess the risk to the ed fund, which is
Mhm.
hard to sell.
Right,
And so you're gonna have to
right.
work to minimize that risk and maybe stage things as they go in.
Yeah, and then we talked about this morning, but I would like us to look at flood insurance in here, just to understand enough to talk to our constituents who don't seem to be
And
have
I
a
don't
future
know,
path for flood insurance.
whereas Montpelier is saying they're having a hard time getting people to come talk to the business.
They
That's-
can't even find a
yeah,
flood
well,
insurance expert.
FEMA, we found out this summer, won't talk to us. They
Mhm.
don't talk to legislative
Right.
bodies. They are a federal agency. And National Flood Insurance, I don't know if I think it's part of FEMA, but I'm not sure.
It's a federal
I think we'd have to
program.
get somebody federal,
Yeah.
maybe on Zoom we could do that,
Right,
to talk to us.
yeah,
It's very expensive.
right,
And it came into place mostly in Florida, probably a little in California,
right,
because the private insurers just couldn't have,
yeah,
the price was so
Well,
high.
there is private flood insurance
There is.
available.
But my guy down here had flood insurance from Lloyd's of London
Mhm.
and had gotten something from FEMA in 92 or maybe during Irene, because they got flooded down there all the time.
Mhm.
And he had flood insurance and they said, no, it has to be federal flood insurance or it doesn't count and we can't do anything for you this time.
Well, if they get flooded all the time, they probably shouldn't be living there.
Well, where would you like him to go?
I,
I've got 3 people down there and
but if
the
they
kids
get
are in,
flooded all the time,
they get flooded. Well, we have one guy buried and flooded 5 times. These are, where are they to go? They've got to keep them up in their school system. That's the problem. There's no place for them to go and so they
we're not
stay there.
replacing housing stock that we have
Yeah.
lost at a fast enough rate. We
Yeah.
are losing more housing
I
than we're
mean,
gaining.
we have lost a lot in Barry. Maybe this committee should take a drive by, because it's improved, it's cleaned up since we were there in August, but there is 3 blocks of housing in Barry. And it's on the river, and yes, they regularly get some water in their basement. This was the worst. They had it all the way up to the first floor, through the first floor. You might want to talk to Representative Peter Anthony, whose house has been destroyed. There's no place for them to go, even in Barry.
Well, the issue though is providing money, particularly government grants and so on, to repair and to resolve flood situations that have happened multiple times before. Is that a good use of public money? If we get to that.
I've been trying to get public money for at least one of my people down here on, going towards the cemetery, along the river. She wants to raise her house up. It's an historic house, she
Yeah.
doesn't have to. But if she sells out to FEMA and pays off her mortgage, she hasn't got any money to go anywhere else. It costs $200,000 to $300,000 to raise up.
Well, to raise a house, I can understand, to get it above the floodplain so that it doesn't flood again. But the notion of putting money into something that has flooded 5 times, that
Right.
is not enough to solve the problem, and it's gonna flood again.
Well,
That's not
You know, we went
Fair
down,
environments.
I hope you all will hear from these folks, and maybe in our joint hearing we will, but, you know, we went down to Brattleboro where they removed senior housing that had flooded several times since the 60s, created new floodplains, and now Brattleboro believes they can withstand a 50-year storm with minimal damage and minimal spillover from the river. But it took them 7 years to get those low-income seniors a new building.
And 50-year storms come every 15 or 16.
Well, but Brattleboro is now in a much better position, like many of the communities where that faced Irene flooding and were better off.
But they were single-family homes and they're now multi-story apartment buildings.
They were like cottages,
Individual
yeah.
homes.
Right.
So, yeah, we've got a housing problem, and then we've got how do you pay to do these things, because the people that own them can't afford to raise them or do things. You go along any of the shores now, you have to build your house on stilts. And some people can afford to do that, others can't. But,
Well, perversely, a lot of that frequently flooding land, like Whetstone Brook, was cheap land. So
Yeah.
that's how
Right, exactly.
these folks who are less able to afford a more secure location ended up.
that's why the trailer parks. Weston was in danger. They had the roads closed on both sides of it. It's the one that's down Route 12 on the other side of the interstate. They did a lot of raising up the pads and stuff, and they came up to the skirting, but didn't come in the trailers this time in July. But that's floodplain. But where are you gonna move them? I mean, we've got very little land. And most of the land that's flat is prime ag, so we're gonna have to put housing where we can put it and where the jobs are. But yeah, where are you gonna move downtown Montpelier? Downtown Barry, the only state, I guess the pavilion is open now. But I think that's the only state office that's open. Montpelier doesn't have a hotel. They're flooded out. And the owner of the hotel bought it 2 weeks before the flood.
Didn't realize.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
We also don't have good flood maps. I'm sure your committee's gonna work on that, but we don't even know where is safe. Alluvial fans are a huge,
The flood maps are out of date.
they're out of date, and alluvial fans aren't something we even have mapped, nor can you get insurance for, which is mudslide. Now various full of mudslides.
Mary's full of mudslides. Yeah, the soil is saturated around here. And I know Barry has. We have clay with the inland sea sand on top of it, and when it gets saturated, it slides. We had a big one down in Killington.
Yeah, that's right, and Ludlow.
Yeah. So we have a lot of issues. Our revenues are at forecast, but that's not going up as fast as our expenses, because we're getting hit with inflation too. And it's going to be interesting. So I'm hearing housing. Anybody else got bills that are coming here or other places that you've got priorities?
Not to cost money. Not to cost money.
Oh, they don't have to cost money. We do something without costing. We don't cost it, we just raise it when they cost it.
That's right. See, across the hall, they spend it, we just take it.
Well, no, anything new that is going to raise money.
So I don't know, the kind of work we're talking about in terms of river corridors, floodplains, dams and wetlands. um, can entail significant investments and steady investments. I don't know if they will end up necessarily as capital money or if it involves bond, like the revenue streams for a long term, it's like a war effort or something, like we go after war bonds for this in terms of trying to raise money. And I don't know where we'll end up going on that, but I sort of raise it as, it's not just the money to help improve like the dams program for the next year. It's that when you find problems at dams, then now you need capital, you need serious money to either do maintenance, repair, or removal.
Mhm.
Stuff like that. So there's a revolving loan fund, but how's that gonna be funded for the long haul?
It's gonna be capitalized in the first place.
Yeah, so it's too early for me to say, but I can see that things we're gonna be talking about are gonna cost serious money, and it's gonna require steady funding for an extended period of time.
Which is, I put the flood bond bill in just because I knew I was gonna need a vehicle if we decided we needed to raise some money. And bonding is voluntary. I don't know how successful it'll be. I think it'd be more successful than license plates. As a means to raise funding. There's also, I don't know if anyone's put a bill in, but there definitely has been a press conference about a surcharge on higher incomes. Surcharges are usually done for short-term, single purpose with sunset. We've only done one, and that was under Snelling. But that is something we could look at for floods. If I don't think it's appropriate to do a permanent surcharge. If you want to do that, then you just raise the tax rate or put another.
I mean, I just worry that income is so portable and property is, someone owning a second home is pretty indicative of their ability to pay more than pushing somebody to just be 6 months in a day in Florida. It just seems like we don't have that many people who shelter their income wealth here.
No.
For that
No,
reason.
this is not a place to shelter your wealth.
Right, but your property, and, generally, I feel like the people who buy property here are benefiting from their idea of a livable planet,
Oh, this is the second
So,
home.
yes, yeah, they're holding on to it, in my mind, as climate immigrants, as people who want insurance policy if Texas freezes over or Florida goes underwater where they're building all the housing.
And that would be as simple as just adjusting your tax rate.
Right.
And dividing up that non-homestead. And they do it everywhere else. In Cape Cod or Massachusetts, it's distance from the water. And if you can see it, you're taxed at a much higher rate than the folks around you who can't see it.
And if we did a surcharge on non-primary residences, then sell it, then okay. Like we're not incentivizing someone to move their income, we're incentivizing them to pay more or let it be housing for somebody else.
Yeah. So that one, I think we definitely will look at, and that might go in your housing omnibus bill, which you have discussed it and looked at it. Could make a really short stint here. Okay. Other than that, I read and I'm not remembering the bills that came in. Randy, do you have any? You said you had a housing bill in?
I have a housing bill, and it probably is gonna wind up being part of the omnibus bill that will be committee bill. I think we can come to sufficient agreement to make that happen.
Yeah, and that has either like a TIF or a tax incentive in it?
Doesn't have a tip in it.
That was coming from economic development.
Oh,
And they have that as a bill in the House, and I just told them we consider it for either the economic
It's
development.
not in what I have.
Tom Wilson mentioned to me a couple of years ago, a housing tip. And I said, talk to me more about it.
Right.
And he hasn't, but
Who was the rest of them?
Tom Lozon, who's
Okay.
Mayor Barry,
Mhm.
and Tom Lozon.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But he develops a lot of property, has a lot of rental property, so, he's a CPAs, you know, that's something, I mean, if that's the only way we can tax, you know, we get some money to do housing, we just gotta shore up the ed fund first, but the bottom line is, we've got too few kids in too many schools, and we're so rural, it's hard to push them together anymore. And we just need more kids in those schools, cause it's marginally more expensive to put 10 more kids in a school. It's like if you lose 10, you don't cut your budget by that much. And if we can do some housing and get some kids in the schools, and get some taxpayers, it'll make it easier on everyone.
This discussion's making me think back to when we wanted to fund clean water work with a steady source of money. And Treasurer Pierce, remember we asked the Treasurer's office to come back with a report that said, come tell us ways we could raise money. And then she laid out, wrote a report, and it laid out something like 11 or 17 criteria for what is a well-designed tax and why you would bond or not bond. And
She didn't like bonds.
it was, I don't know that we
What?
She didn't like bonding. She
No.
liked paying.
Right, and so although it wasn't, it's not immediately applicable, it was a useful outline for how you might think about money you need to raise year after year for steady investments to improve
We found
something
something,
with an
percentage
infrastructure
of some
side.
tax that we funded in clean water. In here.
We ended up, I would say, weaseling our way to a solution, not actually following the treasurer's
Sometime in the middle of the night, I think at the end of the session, we came up with.
There's
Somebody had
property
a-
transfer tax, and then there was like, something else.
Well, that is also, somebody's proposed to me that, we could up the property transfer tax on this expensive house.
Property transferring.
So, there are things out there that could be done, for better or worse. Tom, do you have anything to share?
The one thing I'd love to say is I just, S-118, I don't think we took any testimony on it last year. It's the exempting all military retirement and military survivor benefits income. I'd just love to have that discussion as a committee and hear from some informed individuals about how we compare to other states and why we tax that
The
benefit.
only problem with that is, for every dollar I forgive from veterans, I have to raise it from somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to do tax exemption
We're
for
doing
veterans
both,
benefits, so take it.
It's just a different type of, can I, 2 minutes? Yeah, it's just a different type of job. They can't negotiate or bargain for better working conditions. They have to say military ready, armed ready. It's just something that a lot of other states, I understand 25 of them, don't tax at all. So I just wanted
And
to.
we
we
did some
found-
studies a couple of years ago, because you had raised that question of, what's happening with states that are recently adapting those taxes, and are they, for example, adding them to other categories like first responders and so on, and what's then the dollar effect? And so we, through NCSL and others, we got a lot of data on that already. And the issue is, A, it hasn't been extended to other people for these newer taxes, and 2, it is raising revenue.
And I wonder I mean, I support it as well. I wonder if it makes sense to do it for a particular age category or a period of time
Well, we do it
for
for
seniors.
the same,
Right.
what we did when we did the last bill. You get the same exemption you get for Social Security, only you can start taking it the day you show up here at 40 years old until you get to Social Security, and then you've got to pick either or. But it gave the same tax benefit that we give to every other Vermonter.
Is that a income eligible based? Or is it for everyone?
No, it's you, if you make, I think we're up to 90,000 for a
Okay.
couple, you get to deduct
Your social security.
your social security and your railroad security and other things, federal workers. And we did that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a limited amount of money though, it was
Yeah.
capped in terms of how much
Right,
the effect was. And
but,
It makes housing less affordable.
well,
Which one?
how many people did you had a figure for the number of people would have to move here?
No, I would just going from, if the purpose of exempting this is to bring more people into Vermont to buy, military people to buy houses, it makes houses more expensive.
Well, supply and demand, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Solving two
we'll
separate
talk
problems.
about it, but,
The other thing I'll say, I just echo everything that was said about housing and second homes and the opportunity cost of vacant houses sitting on the hillside, not generating economic activity
yeah.
is something worth looking at. So I love the
Well,
conversation.
we've been trying to look at that.
I'm getting called to the principal's office, so I'm gonna.
Oh, you see, I get called to the
You take
principal's
one get in
office.
trouble, I don't know.
He's gonna tell you you can't do your job next week.
What's that?
So he'll tell you you can't do your job next week.
Cheers.
Okay. All right, we can get that on. Senator McDonald, I know, I guess it's coming here, you have a bill. You got anything else you wanna work on this year?
No, I spoke to you about one this morning, and I spoke to the chair of
Yeah,
economic development
totally.
about the same bill.
Right.
This is the contractors that left
So
wires in the
Mhm.
hayfield, and it was under litigation when we were looking at it last time, and we dropped it. So, we'll take another look at it, and
Where does that stand now?
Pardon?
Where does that stand now?
The farmers accepted a settlement. And, which they're not happy with, but I'm sure the insurance company's not happy with either.
so it was a good settlement.
Pardon?
It's a good settlement, nobody's happy.
The signatories were obliged to not share
What it was.
publicly what the settlement
Yeah.
was.
Well, and I guess that issue was, there was a subcontractor, and the subcontractors had let his license lapse like the day, and it was a little fuzzy as to exactly when the license lapsed and if it was his insurance. And so his insurance lapsed,
And the winner was the utility.
well, in this case, it was EC Fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
but I think they have,
has subcontracts everything.
yeah, well, I think they have, and that has implications for all the other CUDs we put out there. And I think they were protected, they had it in the contract with the subcontract, they weren't worried when they were in here. They required that he have insurance, and he didn't.
The bill would say if you hire a subcontractor to get a better, to pay less.
Senator, you can't keep putting, intentions or motivations into laws.
People usually buy subcontractors to equalize their workforce and a whole bunch of
Yes,
different beneficial reasons. But one of the reasons should be to avoid, liability.
well, we will look into that as soon as it comes here. One thing I'm supposed to ask you
Oh,
all,
but, okay, question
yeah,
about that. Should I ask for the bill to be recommitted here? I can't remember if we.
I think you, Bloomer will write your speech, but I think you asked to be economic
But we
development
agree,
to, yes, to
Okay.
be, with the agreement of the chair, to
Mhm.
be
recommitted to.
recommitted, or, yeah, whatever the word is,
Yes.
Bloomer will write it officially.
Right, but I'll go ask them to send the bill
Yeah.
here tomorrow.
Secretary Bloomer has the well-used piece of paper.
Yes.
What's the bill number?
182,
482?
180.
182, I was like, we're up to.
We have enough to-
Okay.
Okay.
Bloomer knows which one it is.
Okay.
So anyway, I have been asked to ask you all, how much paper do you want this year? I'm getting the agenda because that's where I take notes. Everything is online and on the committee site, so we just need to know if you want hard copies of everything. Do you need a hard copy of the agenda?
I like hard copies of bills.
You, I've already told them.
I usually just, if I can ask Zane, like that day, does that make sense? I mean, cause sometimes it's a big report and I wanna
Are you
write
ready
in
to read
it, yeah, like
Okay.
the childcare report versus
Okay.
like I don't need a
So
bill.
can you,
That works with me, that's right.
Okay, great, so like
so in
case by
general, we
case,
don't
yeah.
have to do everything except for Senator McDonald. And Senator Bray, you like everything?
I do, I still prefer hard copies to work from,
Okay.
thank you.
And, my other Luddite, yes.
Actually, I was going to say, I think we're all electronic.
Wow,
It's neater, it's cleaner.
wow, you have,
Both of my chairs are in.
Much easier to erase.
yeah, it is. Okay,
True.
I know Senator Chittenden does everything on his iPad, so.
He's a whiz.
We've got two and one maybe, and one agenda. Okay. Anything else? Did everybody have a good off-season?
What about
West? It was too wet.
It's been
Cloudy.
wet,
Too
man.
busy.
This sounds like when my son lived in Portland.
Yeah.
And there were hummingbirds on his birthday in February, but he says it just rains.
Yeah, this is not Vermont weather.
No.
This is like
This
Massachusetts,
is Portland.
San
This is like-
Francisco weather. Yeah.
Massachusetts isn't like this.
Well, it's like that you come up here for the snow and
And dry,
Massachusetts is
dry,
just weather.
dry cold.
My relatives came up last week to learn how to ski and it's
But 3 weeks ago, I drove over Apga, and it looked like deep winter.
Yeah,
3-foot snowbanks,
right.
snow, a couple feet of snow. I mean, it was like great coverage. It was like, oh, it looks like we're finally launching into winter the right way. And then 57 degrees and 2 days of rain.
Right.
I've still got
See you later.
1.5 foot banks, where we plowed those 2 heavy storms, and everything else is done. Coming back yesterday from Burlington, the Camel's Hump and all the tops, and Waterbury has
Beautiful.
snow.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
And it's beautiful coming there, the mountaintops had it, but I guess what Senator Starr told me, that Jay Peak is booming, they're making snow in the water park, and he said they're doing very well up there this year.
Do you want to design?
I think we are about ready, I'm crossing the chimney. Tomorrow, I'm not scheduling a meeting because I'm not gonna try and start
Oh, yeah.
anything, for half an hour before the governor's address and a half an hour after the governor's address.
speaking tomorrow.
It's State of the State at 2:00, so we won't meet Friday. We're gonna start with the property tax and get an update, and then next week, I put on the agenda, and Faith and Zane are working at this. I'm gonna ask the schools to come in and tell us exactly what their financial situations are. I mean, I obviously have Barry and Montpelier, but I was gonna call the Superintendent's Association and, just have them tell us who'd like to come in. And then we'll start seeing what's happening there. I know Julia is still researching and trying to figure out the impact of waiting, and if that's got any impact, especially adding that new category, which is ruralness, which takes in a big swath of Vermont. But so far, we haven't got any data, and if we did find an issue, we couldn't change it to impact this year's. But that's where we're gonna start. I'm also gonna have just some flood recovery. I've got my two big towns, but we'll try Johnson and Ludlow, and just what they're looking at, having lost significant portions of their grand list, and along with our property tax increase, there may be some significant increases in local taxes. Just accept that, just to offset their loss.
Should we take a look at school construction? Is that moratorium like forever?
No,
Okay.
there's been a,
So far,
this has all been waiting on a facilities study that the House commissioned, and you weren't here a couple years ago when we had a nice little surplus. We lowered tax rates, but we put some money aside because all of the, what is it? Things we were testing for in schools, PCPs, or
PCBs,
PCBs.
something different.
I spent too many years in health and welfare because we were banning everything. And they all had it. But yeah, and we know there was gonna be a cost. We put some money aside, and last year it all got spent, and just told the 3 schools that have been identified, spend it. There's more that have come in, and we're gonna have to deal with it. And we had so many school bonds out when we were constructing in the 70s that we put a moratorium so we could pay it off. Well, it's been paid off, but we've been bonding for other things. So we've got to see if we can get some ability to bond and then talk about how it's used, because it isn't rebuilding schools necessarily. It's repairing it and refurbishing it.
Yeah, and there are some that almost probably would be
There was some that,
cheaper to tear them down
Yeah.
and build a new one. It's always a hard sell. In fact, I shouldn't say always, because I rarely try. Every now and then, Woodstock needs money, and not everyone in Woodstock is rich.
right,
People immediately go, oh, poor Woodstock. You know what, they got a school that's really a wreck. And it's old, it doesn't really has that post-World War II Long Island kind of look about it. But, so it looks sort of like modern, but it was modern 60 years ago. You know, it's real old and
I
it's
mean,
falling
that's
apart.
most of our schools,
Historic
very few of them
preservation, you
built
can't touch
since
that.
then. I know Stonewall replaced their school.
Yeah.
It's also probably 50, 60 years old. But it's out there, and if we don't do something, those major repairs are going to get voted, and then they're going to go into the school spending formula, and everybody in the state, which may or may not be fair, but what we found in the past is that towns that have the money, we were looking at the South Burlington Sports Center, and the towns in the kingdom that can't get the money to repair their roof in their school, can't afford it, so do you really want that going on? So that's a discussion that's gonna have to be had, probably at a higher level than just this committee.
What I understand about the benefit of when they used to have states capital support for schools is that the state could then prioritize based on need across communities, and you're not getting that. Right now, you're getting the communities with political will to pass school bonds.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's worth reconsidering
Yeah.
bringing it back.
But
For the record, that South Burlington complex failed miserably. That
Yes,
was
it
the
did.
biggest no vote there.
which allowed us to kick the can further down the road.
when
But there are,
at 60 Best, all the newest school buildings were going right up to where Vince lived. So, and we were just riding up on the bus to go to these hearings with our jaws dropping at new school, new school, new school. But those are, they've aged a little bit
yeah,
since then.
yeah, so we've got enough to keep us busy, but we're gonna start trying to figure out what's going on with the property tax, and then we'll be looking at funding for other things that are gonna deal with the property tax, and just trying to figure out what that impact would be. suppose if it's one or two houses, it won't be much impact. If it's 500, it will probably have a major impact, so we're gonna have to talk to folks about that.
And Senator down you said the magic word Act 60, which prompted me to remember that John Frieden asked me to give you his very best. He was Act 60 architect.
Yes,
Paul
So,
those are all still up. Okay, well, that's it, unless anyone has anything.
Do you have any bills you're putting in that I haven't signed up to, that
Um,
I want to?
wait, I have the one here
Dick Sears.
that asks for, emergency management to evaluate our flood preparedness, i.e. Shelters, evacuation orders, evacuation sites. In 92, the city of Montpelier had two emergency shelters within town. We didn't have a school evacuation plan. Ann Watson says now the kids at school have been told to go to National Life. On this, the city, we now have a kids evacuation plan, but the city had no shelters. At one point when they were talking about a possible wave of water from the Wrightsville Dam, the email that went out to people said, there's a possible wave of water. We don't know what to tell you. You might want to think about going to the second floor of your house.
Didn't go to sleep with your life jacket on.
I mean,
When the first floor gets washed out.
yeah, I mean,
Well, seriously, so there's a dam's counterpart to that, like, when you have a dam.
Yeah.
Then you would, it will make sense to have an obligation to assess potential. They do rate them on risk, but I don't know that after that, that they then have to create an emergency management plan that says, okay, given that risk, here's what people in the path of.
I think, because when Wrightsville was, we were told it was 30 minutes before a 10-foot wall of water went through downtown Waterbury, which is when we drained the reservoir and rebuilt the Wrightsville Dam. And yeah, I don't know if there is an evacuation plan.
Yeah.
We
So
just-
that's one of the things we were going
Yeah.
to do.
We just got an email that the governor and the treasurer have announced a resilience strategy that includes emergency communication systems. I just don't know whose committee that sits in. But it got
And I
lost.
think also a funding plan for that.
Right, well, maybe if the
Why
treasurer is
the
involved,
treasurer,
yeah, there's
you know.
actually something there.
Maybe they still run flood bonds. But yeah, I mean, we need that kind of communication. I didn't know I was supposed to get on the City of Montpelier website to find out what was happening. In 92, we had everybody that wanted to in every night, told them this is what's happening tomorrow, this is what you need to do. This was a lot worse than City Hall was under, but
Yeah.
we didn't. Katie Trout's was amazing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Barry
Skip
didn't have that
bombs
kind of
and
an
then-
organization, and there was a real difference in.
Yeah.
I mean, I made those calls, they send people out and then they call, say, anybody come to your house on Saturday?
Right.
Katie Trouts knew exactly who
Yes.
it was. I mean, my sump pump came back, I never
Yeah.
thought they could keep track of equipment
Right.
like that.
I gave them a big delivery of supplies.
Yes.
They were able to rotate it.
Yeah, I got sent out to see if I could find
Yeah.
a state warehouse or someplace. I guess we got up to national, because there was a truckload of water they were handing out. They had, and they were filling the rec center, but they had no place to store stuff that was coming in, which is what we need to set up,
Right,
Fire
We
property
need-
attacks.
yeah,
to have
Totally
those
punitive.
things like water, sandbags.
Right.
Sand,
yes,
you know, there
Yeah.
needs to be a supply
right,
that, so if
Yeah.
these are really gonna happen again, of course, we could have 10 years of drought, but,
right,
if this is gonna be a regular occurrence, and it
Right.
looks like it is,
I remember the woman in Cabot who was just tagged like the day a sinkhole opened up.
oh, yeah,
And I called and I just said, do you need any supplies? And she said, we need sandbags, we have a sinkhole, and I said, I'm just gonna put you in touch with the National Guard, you know, they should have called you.
Marshfield didn't have
Yeah.
potable water for 10 days. And then, and they said they notified the state, but it got lost. They had a contractor bringing in non-potable water so you could flush your toilet.
Right.
But they had no drinking water, and nobody seemed to know they had no drinking water. And they're 15 miles from the State House? They're not out in the boonies. And the mudslide just took out their water plant and they couldn't get to it to fix it.
I don't know about not being out in the boonies. I mean, here we are in the only capital in the United States without a United States post office.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, we thought we were big for no McDonald's.
or no Starbucks.
I was saying this morning, I have a campaign mailbox. And I know every January I need to pay for it because that's the only thing I need to report in March. And so I said to my husband, have you gotten a bill? And he said, no, because all your mailboxes, you've been told, have been moved to Barry. So we went over to Barry and yeah, the bill was due, and if we hadn't paid it that day, which was like a day before New Year's, we would have lost it. And he said, well, nobody notified us. There's a notice in the mailbox.
Senator Cummings, are you ready to end live stream?
Okay, Faith, we can go
Yes.
live.